hello everyone. I am Emma Jones. I'm the global lead for GHD's Smart Seeds program, and I'm really pleased to be here today to moderate this session for LaunchVic. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any people from First Nations communities joining us today. And I want to give a warm welcome to all of you for coming along and tuning into this second event in LaunchVic's series, focusing on supporting and growing the agtech sector in Victoria. I also want to just apologise for the slight technical glitch, but we all know we just roll with that these days. And before I introduce you to our panellists, I just want to give you a bit more context for today and just share with you some of the facts about Victoria's horticulture sector. So Australia has an international reputation as a reliable supplier of some of the best fresh horticultural produce in the world. And every year, trillions of pieces of fruit and vegetables are harvested by hand, including cherries. However, it's common for farmers to struggle to find and manage the people to pick the fruit and vegetables. And this results in huge levels of waste and lost profit. For example, in 2019, the Victorian horticulture sector exported $1.6 billion worth of produce. That's just exports. And that accounts for about half of Australia's total horticulture exports, which is valued at $3.2 billion, obviously. Victoria is also the largest producer of mushrooms, asparagus, and broccoli in Australia. Horticulture is the fastest growing agricultural sector in Australia. It's had a 27% hike in value over the past 5 years to now $15.1 billion. And the sector is expected to be a key contributor to Australian agriculture, reaching a $100 billion sector value by 2030. So that gives you a good idea of where Victoria's horticulture is now and where it's likely to head to. So I want to now it's my great pleasure to welcome today's panel on Ripe for the Picking. We're very lucky to have three agtech leaders with us today. I have Georgia Beattie, the CEO of Bulla, Australia's largest organic mushroom farm, and she's a former founder of Lupe Wines. Hunter Jay is the CEO and co-founder of Robotics, a startup working on autonomous fruit picking. Daniel Pelliccia is the CEO and founder of Rubens Technologies. Rubens is the intelligence system for the fresh fruit export industry. And before I just give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, I just want to let you all know that we have a Q&A channel. So please send your questions on this and I will do my best to moderate these. And the chat channel is the best way to communicate to fellow attendees. So please use that to share information and to chat with each other. So let's get started. I'd like to now get you to introduce yourselves, please, Georgia, Daniel, and Hunter. And can you also tell us a little bit about how you began working with agtech and why you're so committed and passionate about this sector? Georgia, let's kick off with you. Can you tell us a bit about your background, please?
Thanks, Emma. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. And I love that we're having this conversation in agriculture within the tech community. So I'm CEO of Bulla Park. As mentioned, we're the largest organic farm in the country. And basically, over the last 12 months or 2 years, as there's been more restrictions in Victoria, I've taken on new board positions. So I'm a director of our industry body, which is the mushroom industry. So it's called the Australian Mushroom Growers Association. I also sit on the Second Bite board, which is we redistribute all the food waste from Coles and Woolworths. So that's been really interesting, having a look at the other side of once we drop food at the supermarkets. And also on the Rowing Australia board, I'm on the National Farmers Climate Change and Soil Strategy Advisory Board. And so that's the whole reason that I got into ag was to grow sustainable food for our climate. So having a finger on the pulse of what's happening on a legislative level is really important to me. And I also sit on the Law Squared Advisory Board, as well as the Hort Innovation, which is our industry body which is where all our levy dollars go, for their it's called a sort of their investment advisory panel. But I mean, it's been, I started my first company at 21 and I exited that in sort of late 2016. I went into tech and because that was sort of a natural progression because it was fast moving. A lot of my friends were in there. But I got there and it just wasn't satisfying. I just didn't find the straight technology to have the purpose that I was looking for my sort of contribution to my career. So I moved into ag. I knew nothing about it. And I've just been learning on the fly. I actually rang this farm to be a customer to buy some mushrooms and then wound up being a shareholder and their CEO. So it's been a while. And for me, the most exciting thing is there's not that many young people in agriculture. So there's this fantastic opportunity if you've got that background of technology to really marry sort of the commercial reality and sort of on-farm challenges together. So yeah, I think it's a super exciting space.
Fantastic. And there's a lot in there that I want to follow up with you on as well. But first, Hunter, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to embark on the founder journey too?
Yeah, sure. It's probably not that different. My background's in technology as a software engineer, mainly working on artificial intelligence-based stuff. So I moved into the space because I was looking for what it's possible to do today, or what would be possible to do in 5 years or 10 years. And field robotics seemed to be like the thing that would be taking off in the near future. So you look around the space of, okay, what could field robotics do? What could you do with machines that can see stuff well and accurately when they're outside and be able to move around outside, which hasn't been possible in the past, at least not very reliably. And in that space, agriculture and specifically fruit picking seemed like the biggest problem that could then start off as like a launching pad for lots of other applications of field robotics in agriculture. So I started this company with a co-founder, Leo, and now we're trying to automate fruit harvesting and hopefully extend that in the future to doing automating other tasks on farms. So it's definitely I think the prediction is coming true. It's very, very hard to get it working. But it's kind of fun that it's a technical problem that's sort of holding us back rather than any demand issue or any regulation issue. It's all like everyone wants this to happen, and it's very fun as an engineer to have the hard bit be the actual engineering part of it. So that's been great, and yeah, we're in trials, and hopefully in another year or two we'll be doing scale commercial fruit picking.
Well, that's exciting, and I'm sure that equally, like with Georgia, there'll be heaps of questions coming through on that too. But finally, Daniel, can you share a little bit about your background and about the origin of how Rubens started as well?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks, Emma, and yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, as it happens, I come from a totally different background. So I started my career as a researcher. I'm a physicist by background. So my early career was working like in particles accelerators or things like that. Back in Europe, in Germany, then that's the reason I came to Australia in the first place was to work in those sort of things. And after a while, obviously, I wasn't really happy with where my career was going, and I always been the kind of person who like to apply those knowledge and trying to get into something that works and they can help people doing things. And AgTech was the natural place where we can actually do these things. We were discussing a little bit earlier that in AgTech, the space between an idea or a first development and an application might be a lot shorter sometimes than other sectors. Think about medtech or so. That's a huge pathway to commercialization. AgTech seemed to be a lot shorter. There was a need of all this sort of automation and new sensing and new technologies coming in. So that seemed to be a good fit. That's where I started. my expertise has always been in the light sensing space, and so what can we do if we measure light? Can we tell something about the things we measure? And that's the reason I started looking at using sensor to measure fruit. Initially, I thought about just the sensor and see where we could actually use those things, and then horticulture came up as a, especially fruit came up as a perfect fit for this sort of thing, so that we can scan a fruit without destroying it, just at the tree, and tell what is maturity. It says it's time to pick, or it's how long we expect it to last it, or so this sort of things. And these are things that can be used by growers to organize their logistics operation around harvest.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is great. So I think I'll start next with Georgia. I know that one of your personal missions is to help create 10 new conscious food entrepreneurs per year. Can you tell us what is driving that and what you're doing to support these entrepreneurs? Just while we're on this topic of how do you get started?
I mean, I guess I want to recreate the opportunities that I had going into agriculture. I've got an intern with me coming out to the farm each day this week, actually. And I mean, number one, my door's always open to come and learn. I mean, there's really, everything is available on the internet, whether it's LinkedIn to try and find the right person that runs a farm or has the expertise, but also YouTube on how the industry works and how to actually understand from, say, in my industry, how to grow mushrooms or how to create compost. And so the critical, because I did spend a little bit of time in tech, and LaunchVic has done an incredible job on sort of getting this concentration within the ecosystem. And so more founders equals better founders, and you get this experience. And so what I want to see is more entrepreneurial minded people going into agriculture, because we need to sort of overcome some quite significant challenges over the next sort of 10 to 20 years as our climate changes, but we still need to be able to grow food in a super smart way. And I think there's fantastic opportunities there, but at the same time, we need the right sort of minded people that are going to take a few more risks. I'm tinkering away with robots myself on the farm, and you need that kind of diversity in thought and experience to, I mean, when you're a farmer, you're a jack of all trades, right? You need to be able to go and fix the generator if something breaks, as well as talk to Coles and Woolworths and do the sales pitch, as well as understanding your yield. And it's quite complex, and I love that. But the entrepreneurial mindset's actually perfect for it. So I want to see all sorts of industries coming into farming, because that sort of different experience is going to move the dial for us. And so what I've found, it was hard to get in the door of a farm. I just typed in mushrooms into LinkedIn and just added everyone that had mushroom on their profile, and just began cold calling to understand the industry. And I guess what I'm trying to do is put a whole heap of bait out on the internet to say, come in, I'll teach you everything that I know, just so you can come in and innovate and and change the industry for the better. So yeah, that's sort of my little mission. But it's also fun teaching people, and you're on a farm, so it's nice to have like a different kind of interaction.
I love that. So it sounds to me like you're in part wanting to have more entrepreneurs to not only teach them, but to learn from them as well. So you really want to have that, which I know I observe too in the LaunchVic ecosystem across Victoria, that there's a lot of generous people that want more people like this, but with that diversity to learn and to keep improving and keep innovating. Yeah, great. But I know that you have a farming background, Georgia, but does Daniel and Hunter, I know neither of you are from farming backgrounds. So you sort of did touch on why you got into this, and partly it was because of the technical problem to solve and more from that technology background. But can you talk about the specific sort of pathway of how you got into that farming side?
Go on, Daniel.
I don't know. Yeah, go first.
Okay. So, I mean, we basically were just looking around at what problems to solve and came to fruit picking. And then it came to, okay, how do we actually find out what to do? So we started just by calling up farmers, and they were great. You know, you get a farmer on the phone and they'll chat for like an hour until you'll be like, okay, how much did you spend on fruit picking? They'll just give you all the numbers. How much does someone pick in a day? How do they pick? And they're like, yeah, you do this and that and that. How big's your farm? They'll tell you how much damage. They'll just tell you everything, which is fantastic when we did those first sort of calls and reach outs and trying to learn something. Very early on, we had this sort of prototype machine, which was on a trailer, and we're driving up to pick your own fruit in Bilpin because we're in Western Sydney. And we just figured, okay, we'll go up and we'll pay the $20 and we'll hopefully they won't mind us using a machine instead of, you know, a person picking it. And they didn't, which was great. But then on the way back home, we were going past this farm, this tiny little farm in Hawkesbury, which was doing oranges. And we're like, oh, maybe we could try to pick oranges too. So we just turned into the farm and we sort of find the farmer and said, hey, you know, I'm Hunter from Robotics. We've got this machine here. The farmer says, yeah. I said, well, you know, we're trying to automate like picking and we've got this prototype, doesn't really work yet. Would you? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, do you mind if we sort of bring it into your trees and try to pick some of your fruit? Yeah. So, okay, can I just go over there and pick some fruit? Yeah. And I was like, okay, sweet, thanks, see ya. And there's no issues at all. They're really, they've been super receptive. It's been a very easy space to get into.
Now, and I know just while we're on this story for a bit, you then sort of jumped from there into StartMate. And what was it like taking Ripe Robotics through StartMate?
Yeah, StartMate was great. We only went through StartMate recently, actually. That was this year. So that was a remote thing. But the biggest sort of benefit of it was just being able to connect with other people that are doing companies and things. Because especially like this past year, it's fairly like isolating doing something where there's not many people within your own company. There's not many people to sort of chat to. So stuff like this and stuff like StartMate was great. And one of the really great things recently from StartMate was that they let us interview the next batch of people to sort of give our assessment of whether they should go through StartMate again. And that was actually super, like that taught me a ton because I've never been on the other side where you're sort of interviewing a company to decide if they should be funded before. So that was, I don't think they intended it as a lesson, but it was very useful. And I should shout out, before StartMate, we went to Incubate, which was another accelerator at USyd, which we did at the very start before we had anything. That was just like an idea. And StartMate was the a bit when we were a bit further along, and it was a bigger company and a bigger program. Yeah, but they're both great.
So Incubate was at University of Sydney, and now you've done StartMate, and I know that you've relocated to Shepparton near me in Wangaratta. What are your plans for Shepparton now, and are you going to grow your startup team based there?
Yeah, so the company is based in Shepparton. I'm on Mitch McNabb's orchard in Ardmona at the moment, and that's where we have our sort of facility where we assemble the machines and sort of have the actual physical work happen, which is great because we're right near all the fruit and right near the customers, and it's the best farming region to be starting something like this in. The way we sort of do, like, the company's based here, so anytime we can hire people here, it's great. We do sort of do remote work for our engineering staff, because sometimes it can be hard to find qualified engineers within sort of the Shepparton or region, so they can come in to the facility each day. So instead, we sort of do a 25% on-site, 75% remote work, so we can get engineers from anywhere in Australia or New Zealand, and then we just fly them in or drive them in for a 2-week period, and they spend the rest of the time sort of doing their design work and technical work offsite, and then they come for 2 weeks and sort of integrate it with everyone else's work on the physical machine, and we sort of do that drive back and forth. Yeah, so that's been working fairly well. Definitely, if any engineers are watching, I would encourage you to apply, even if you're not based in Shepparton. But yeah, if anyone is based in Shepparton, that's like an extra bonus.
And if anyone has any questions for Hunter, please pop them in the Q&A. We can come back to those in a little bit. So Daniel, back to you and how you got into this.
Yeah, so So I said I have this idea, obviously at the beginning, so I wasn't really sure what to do with it. Of course, you have this core technology, it can work. So I started looking around and see where this was used. Many sectors already use sensing in a quite applied way, very reliable. Not much in agriculture or horticulture specifically. So for me, the closest point of approach was essentially two. Obviously trying to talk to farmers, but also trying to talk to scientists. That's my background, so probably I find some affinity. And so LaunchVic has been really instrumental, and the smart farms, the pure smart farms especially, has been really instrumental for them, to essentially direct me and say, this is the challenges that people have. This is the challenges that we are asked as a support in the industry activities to research or to do. And so that was really good to help me say, this is the way we have this core technology, but how can we make it into a product that is actually helpful at solving a problem? And that's, obviously the struggle of many startups is getting the idea in the hands of consumers. So that has been really good. So that's probably has been the best for me. I found it a very easy way to get into the sector, and then through them talking to farmers and start to understand the dynamics on how this is done. How do you test fruit before? How do you understand when it's ready? And start asking these sort of questions to farmers, then help to actually design a product that can be used. And again, as a scientific background, I've always seen that there were like 50 years of maybe papers written on this topic and very little applied at the other end. And so you start asking the question, why this has happened? So there's something wrong with the technology, or it's something wrong with the translation. Obviously, what I think is in most cases is something wrong with actually translating this research, taking out of the lab, talking to people and start using it. So that's, it needs probably a tinkering mindset at the beginning. And that's what I found probably a good fit for me. Yeah.
That sounds like to me, you've got, you're talking about not just the science and the research, but also then access to having that on farm, and also the access to a wealth of people. And was this all happening at the LaunchVic's Tatura Smart Farm? Is this where it was all based for you?
Well, I was there regularly, and then obviously I've been talking to farmers in the region, Golden Valley mostly. In some cases, LaunchVic made the introductions. In other cases, it came out naturally. So, but that was in a sense always a good reference for me.
Yeah. So you touched on a point that these problems have been around for a while. People have been trying to solve them, and that I've heard too that there's often a fair bit of criticism around ag tech not solving real problems for on-farm situations. I'll open this up to all of you, and please, people on the tuning in, please ask your questions on the Q&A too. But for all of you, what are your experiences working with farmers and having those conversations about the new technologies to sort of find where those gaps or barriers are, and how they're responding?
So maybe I can keep going with what I was saying and answer this question is, for me, the issue was trying to understand exactly how to, a core technology essentially hasn't changed from the idea I had originally. What has changed is how you package it into something that can be used. So those conversations were very important. Obviously, working with farmers. So if you can be sure you always will have some frank, unfiltered feedback from a farmer, and that's actually very good, because it actually helps you iterate fast. You don't go too much around. So if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. You have to change it. And so those conversations were really useful to actually get the product right. And then you understand also things around, again, as I'm probably talking to all technologists out there, we tend to fall in love with the things we develop, right? It's our creation, it's our baby, so we like that. But then we talk to people and we understand that what we think the thing is doing is actually might not be what a user might think it will do. So when I go to a farmer and say, this device can help you pick better fruit because you'll get it at the right time, the farmer might say, well, it actually helps me to do this testing faster. So I actually get an hour back a day instead of, and so again, it's about having this conversation that helps you shape the product you want to offer to those users.
Yeah, fantastic. And Georgia or Hunter?
Sure. Yeah. No, it's something similar for us. Growers have been really great, sort of teaching us the things that we need to know in order to make it work. And sometimes I look at the machine and I have suggestions, and a lot of the suggestions are good, and some are less good. But the fact that they're just sort of giving ideas out there is super useful. Like they'll walk along and say, no, those wheels are too small, and we're like, well, I mean, it was able to drive on my lawn. I was like, no, these lawns are definitely not like that. You have massive ruts. You got to fix those wheels. I'm like, okay, good. Thanks for telling us. And then sometimes I'll say like wild stuff, like, oh, what if you sort of put someone in a VR suit and had them control the machine? You're like, well, I don't think we actually need to do that. That would be not as good as just having it do it itself, or probably worse than even a human picking. But yeah, just the fact that they give in ideas, and some are actually really, really useful, and we definitely change the machine to sort of match where their experience is, as in they see problems that we don't see because they have different backgrounds. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm picking up that there's a bit of a part of what's making all of this work is that diverse, the wisdom of collective wisdom of everyone, and that those diverse perspectives all adding to those pieces. Georgia, what are you seeing in terms of farmers' attitudes to some of the technology you're using?
Well, I mean, I am the farm, right? So I do get different companies coming and pitching different products. I was interested, Daniel or Hunter. We're vertical farming, right? And so it's indoors, perfect environment to sort of have consistency. And ideally, with what I'm sort of tinkering around with at the moment, you're able to sort of pick mushrooms 24 hours a day. I had a like Robotics as a service company pitch the other day, and they were saying, we'll just put the robot in and it'll cost $35 or $40 an hour or something. But then it's like, well, that's basically what we're paying at the moment with labor that's got a quality perspective. But anyway, that's a side note. But when a robot picks up two things, there's what's it called? A load adjustment? What's it called?
Yeah, it can depend, but yeah.
Anyway, that's my biggest problem. So what I'm seeing is some really, really smart founders, and I just want to give them my money, but we can't get something that is actually tailored or that really works with my specific problem. And just what you were alluding to, Daniel, like you'll go to a farm, you'll be like, I'm going to solve this. But you get to the farm and they say, oh no, that's fine. Here's our problem. This is what's costing me the most from rejections at Coles because it's got this bump on it or whatever it might be. And they're the sort of day-to-day just headaches that we receive as farmers when either our labour is too high or we're getting rejections from customers from a quality perspective. And so, but from that automation piece, I've just found, and this is sort of probably the biggest challenge that I'm having, is technology isn't able to be sort of scaled across lots of different industries because everyone's got different problems. And even in mushrooms, there is different on-site engineering. And so there's sort of two different style farms. And so there used to be like 250 mushroom farms in Australia. Now there's like 30. And so it's sort of not an industry that's necessarily, like, it's not big enough for you to really deep dive and invest in. But then I've got sort of specific problems I want solved. So my like N=1 versus sort of the others. So that's my biggest challenge, is that in order to get something that's specific for me, I need to go and spend like $500,000 and then hopefully it works, right? And so there's quite a big investment But as an entrepreneur, I'm like sort of really happy to roll the dice, but maybe others aren't, right? And you need to be you need to have that agile build, measure, learn loop so that you're not sort of going down a path that's completely wrong. But that's what I'm saying. And if anyone's got a solution there, come see me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you put your finger on the difficulty there, is that there's so much complexity, like even more in outdoor agriculture. There's a lot of variation. No farms have the exact same trellis. No farms have the same ground. They're growing different varieties. The way we're approaching it is kind of similar. It's the robotics as a service sort of model. So we're targeting we're starting in a super narrow space, which is picking of apples and plums that are on 2D trellis. And then we want to gradually sort of expand out from there. But yeah, no, it is hard. The good news is the algorithms and robots are also getting more general. Like 10 years ago, you'd have a very specific algorithm which would detect one particular variety of apples, and if you gave it different lighting or if you gave it a different variety, it would break. Whereas now we use the same model, and that detects all the varieties of apples and all the varieties of plums and apricots and other stone fruit, and then also assesses them to say if they can be picked or not. And that's the same same algorithm that we've trained in different ways to do these different tasks. And we use the same end effector for all those different kinds of fruit. Sometimes if the size is different, we have like a large version and a small version. But say once you solve the problem of how do you stop bruising, then that's solved for that fruit type. We don't bruise apples or plums or apricots because we've solved how to stop the bruising from happening. But then there's other issues which are sort of apple specific. We still try to do oranges, but they hang onto the tree and they've got these long sort of floppy stems that hang onto the tree, which is very different to picking an apple or picking a plum. Picking a plum, which means that when we come in with our suction piece, that's another issue that has to be solved because they hang on so tightly and they're sort of being pulled.
You've got to twist it or something,
which breaks it. Yeah, a person will pick them up and sort of twist it back, but the machine can't do that because we don't need to do that for apples and plums. The suction works really well on apples and plums. So as we sort of expand a little bit, the complexity goes up and we need more and more of these sort of changes. But the starting point is to focus narrow and do it as a service, so the grower doesn't have to sort of trust us. They can just pay they pay a person $40 a bin. At the start, it'll cost us like 100, but we'll still only charge $40 a bin while we're in that trial stage. And then as the cost keeps going down, eventually we'll be able to share those savings, and hopefully also have benefits of having less damage and stuff if we keep continuing in that direction.
Cool.
So we've had a couple of questions come through as well. I've got one here from Ben. He's really interested in some of the problems you might all face with retrofitting some of these robotics and automation. I'm not sure if really sensors applies, but just on retrofitting onto existing farming infrastructure, or whether you have to design a farm to work with the robotics and automation setup. And also the perennial problem of poor Wi-Fi. Are you guys tackling that as well? Georgia, I know that yours is like an enclosed vertical setup. I don't know if do you still get Wi-Fi problems in the farm?
It's a good point, because in our existing infrastructure, they're very enclosed rooms, so you lose phone reception and everything in there. But with the greenhouses we're building now, which I've just got in construction at the moment, are a little bit different. But it's an interesting point because I've designed this new greenhouse we're doing. I've got a rail in between each of the sort of vertical beds. But even no, and I'm pouring concrete next week, so I'm like just finalizing this rail now. But there's so many different rails, and even if I do retrofit, is it actually future-proof, and is it going to be relevant in 5 or 10 years? And so I think that even when you are in the fantastic position of retrofitting a farm, it's sort of retrofitting for now and now's technology. So I'd like throw it to Daniel and Hunter on how you sort of are able to future-proof it.
Yeah, Daniel?
Yeah, well, look, our approach was to actually go as simple as possible with the technology. That helped actually having the farmers using it without too much, training. Just push a button and get result on a smartphone. That's the first thing. And being so simple, then it can be easily adapted. And now that we design a system that can be used by a manual operator, we obviously know that automatic harvesting is coming, and so we know that at some point we have to move over there, and so we have a system that actually fits a robotic arm, and so it can become a nose where the camera can be the eye of the robots, our device can be the nose, and so tell what the fruit is better, and so this sort of approach. The solution was, let's try to keep it simple so that we don't have over-engineered the whole thing, and so it's easier to actually switch or move once it's required. That was our approach, and now it's working with essentially just giving the farmers or the growers a tool to assess the state of the orchard. So they go out, they scan 30-40 fruits, they get the results on the smartphone, and they decide, that's where they send the crew tomorrow, or here, we can wait a couple of days, or this sort of things. At the time in which, obviously, that's one of the questions I always get asked is, a grower cannot scan every fruit. And that's, of course, true. So the growers will scan just a few. A robot can scan every fruit eventually and can work day and night. And so there will be, these things will be solved at that point. Much more effectively, but this already, the solution we have can already work now and fit in the workflow that they have.
I've got some more questions coming up, and one of them is around. I'm just going to read it out actually, because it's actually one of the questions that we were going to ask anyway. But you hear a lot about the potential for agtech to help address challenges in seasonal workforce and labour for the horticulture industry. But there's obviously some barriers to that, as George has identified, such as cost and quality. But what do any of you have, a sort of a position on what's needed to achieve the farm of the future, removing the reliance on seasonal labour? But I'd also just like to add on to that is, what do you see are the future skills required for farming communities? Because, I think that's a really important piece too, that there's lots of, agriculture and horticulture is a big sector, and there's a lot of people's livelihoods that are just part of that. So what do you see as the future skill sets? You've already talked about technology, having such a rapid, potentially rapid cycle of becoming superseded. Do you have any long-term sort of ideas about the future skills needed for people?
I might jump in, Emma. Unless, Hunter, would you like to talk?
No, you can jump in. That's good.
It's like I did when I first jumped into my farm, I did a poll and had a look at everyone's. So we've got about 70 on the farm, and I looked at everyone's CVs and their background just to properly assess the workforce. And I had like a ridiculous number, about 40% had degrees in IT. And so we agriculture, and so we're not seasonal. So we're mushrooms grow 1 millimetre an hour for 7 days a week, every day of the year. And I wish someone had told me that before I got into the industry, because it doesn't stop. It's really interesting having we're employing people that this is a lot of the time the first generation. They're just getting a job just to get a foot in the door in Australia, and so it's my job to just start like elevating them using their degrees to better the farm. Like, it's just amazing. So I take them out of sort of manual labor that they're willing to do and put them onto other projects that are developing technology or on our sort of quality assurance side. So I just think there's such an opportunity in agriculture because of the workforce that's in there. And so that's been a real advantage. I've had staff that have really seen paths for their careers to use what they've been studying. So I think there's like that sort of, I think that's really interesting, that dynamic that we've got on farm. Wait, what was the rest of the question, Emma?
Well, so I'm seeing like 2 points. I'm seeing like the farming communities right across Victoria that have been there for generations, and it's more than just a job. It's a community. It's where they live. So we're talking about the skill sets for those communities, but then we're also talking about the seasonal labor that comes in at harvest or picking, and whether the seasonal workforce will change, but also whether those skill sets within that community that are there all the time, whether you think that they would change too. But I think you kind of touched on that in that there's different skill sets coming into those communities too.
The only thing I would add is that starting to design crops that can be sort of grown indoors and automated a little bit as our country heats up. We're going to be probably forced indoors, and so I think the crop design is an interesting one, not in a genetically modified way, in a sort of natural, when you sort of, as you would do with your plants at home, when you sort of train them to do certain things, it starts to change their behaviors. So I think that can also help. So that's where you get as many people like Daniel and Hunter on farm sharing, this is what it needs to look like for us to do this. Then the farmers can go away and do their magic on the farm.
What it does need to look like for us to be able to pick is the thinner the tree is, the better, and the better maintained the rows are, the better. Those are basically the only two things that matter right now for us actually to be able to pick the fruit. 2D planar is the easiest to pick off. Yeah, because you can see all the fruit and you're not bumping into branches and things.
I'm going to ask a question to you, Daniel, and I think Georgia and Hunter, you might have a view on this as well. But this one's from Paul Jens. Paul's from the Ag Food Opportunities Fund, and he wants to know, what is the largest commercial application of your technology working at the moment? So Daniel?
Yeah, so the largest is harvest prediction. So essentially what growers need at the moment is estimating commercial quality parameters of their fruit before they pick, ideally, and how these are going to be maintained over the supply chain. So this is the question. And so what we do is provide those sort of answers. So what is the sugar content in this piece of fruit? How soft it is, can be shipped, how far can it go? These are the things that at the moment we are rolling out our devices for. And going forward into the future, we are looking at this as a sort of supply chain monitoring device where you can actually scan a piece of fruit. You don't have to destroy it. So you can scan it at the tree, you can scan it just post-harvest before the storage and this sort of thing. So that's an overview of that. And if I can jump in on the previous question, perhaps on the what I see as the opportunity being with these technologies coming online and the cost reduction that this will bring, is the ability, I think, for all regional communities to actually being able to keep the say for the horticulture production local, so that one of the points that you want to differentiate is always the challenge is obviously water, labor, and the ability to differentiate. If you produce a commodity, you would like to have something else, value add on that. And so this is probably, if we start combining those things, then you can have fruit that is picked and probably sorted and maybe even packed already there at the orchard where it's grown. And so you can start branding around those things and you start adding more value for the communities that live. So I think that's for me, in my opinion, it's what's is going to be an advantage of having these technologies in the future at an affordable price, of course. Yeah.
So you're saying that more of the value chain can stay within the community or come back into that community rather than moving on. Yeah,
exactly.
Fantastic. Okay. I'm going to got some more questions, but I really want to ask this question. I want to make sure we get to ask it, so I'm going to ask it now. And it does build on what you're saying, Daniel, because I find that really exciting, being someone who lives in regional Victoria, that there's going to be more opportunity to have that more of the value chain in our local communities. But for all of you, what is it that really excites you about the future of the ag tech sector in Australia and for these regional communities?
I think I touched on a little bit before, but the bit that excites me is the idea that so far we don't have good information about, you know, on a tree by tree level about what's going on. You know, like you kind of go out and you test just a couple of pieces of fruit, or you look at just a couple of trees and you sort of hope that they're representative of the whole block. Whereas in the future, because it'll be so much cheaper to gather all of the data, and we've got better and better algorithms to process it and turn it into useful insights, you'll be able to know really like what the correlations are between different interventions. So you're spraying a particular amount of fungicide or whatever, and you can know exactly how much was going on each, you know, millimeter of the orchard, and then what effect that had. That's I think something that hasn't been possible before, and that's a very exciting change. And then hopefully, if we're reasonably successful with the robots, you'll be able to have the robots both gathering some of that data and actually doing the interventions based off it directly. So you could make predictions about, you know, this is where exactly how much fruit is going to be on each tree. So we need to thin them back by X% on every, and you know that on an exact branch by branch thing, which right now the individual people doing it know, but that's never collated into a sort of whole. You know, one person might do it a little bit differently to another person, or you don't really know exactly what the effect of thinning by X amount is. So it'd be really great to have the big data in agriculture.
I think it's really clear what sort of things excite you, Hunter, and it's like the bigger the challenge, it's even more exciting for you, and that's great. Georgia or Daniel?
From just on Hunter's point, I mean, I think the agriculture is playing straight into the hands of technology. I think that agriculture in reality over the next 30 years is going to be forced indoors, and both from just from a yield perspective, because if the climate's going like this, it's really hard to get a consistent yield. But also, I've got solar panels on our roof. We're carbon neutral very quickly. So we recycle our water. We've got solar panels for our power. I'm then able to really control my crop. I know what's happening, and then I can start doing automation and things. But one thing, Hunter, ideally with robots, we've got really good data, so we're not having to spray fungicide anywhere, ever. So, I mean, really clean farming, I'm really passionate about. I think that data and so the difference, and this is very controversial, but I mean, for me, the difference between using chemicals and not using chemicals is just being really on the front foot with what's happening if you're getting a lot of rain. Sometimes you can't. The wine industry's had a lot of rain recently, which has created a lot of disease. So it's really hard in these sorts of years with lots of rain. But ideally, we're really progressive and data-driven as farmers so that we know that, you know, we need to do this to stay ahead of disease. Does it, whether it's, changing the crop or just changing the conditions. So I'm, really I'm passionate about that from just from a gut health perspective. It's why I went into the industry, and so I think tech can really contribute to that. And I mean, what I'm really excited about is the whole indoor farming, because it can be done locally to where food is consumed. We spend a lot of time and money and fuel on logistics, and so what we're looking at is how do we automate what we're doing, but then sort of drop these farms closer to where the food is consumed. And so, for instance, we ship. So if you have an organic mushroom at Coles and Woolworths, the likelihood is very high that it's ours. But we drop to one DC in Victoria, and that DC then sort of takes it to the major DCs in each state, and then it'll go to the smaller supermarkets. And the supermarkets are doing their absolute best on logistics. They're sort of world-class in their information, but there's still a lot of fuel. And so I think that changing the way where food is grown with technology is going to really combat some of the challenges we've got in such a spread out country from the climate change perspective. So I'm super excited about technology's ability to solve some of our sort of climate challenges.
Yeah, look, I know we're really almost out of time. I could listen to that for a lot longer than I have time for. But Daniel, I've got one more burning question, but I also want to get some closing comments from you as well. I don't know if they will mix. So I'm going to just throw it out there because they might combine. There's a great question from Peter, who works at TAFE, and he's wondering about, you know, his graduates working at TAFE. What are the skills and knowledge that they should be providing at TAFE so that they're ready to work in ag tech? But I also, if you've got a comment on that, that would be fantastic. But any final comment from you too?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think TAFEs are already doing excellent jobs, and I've been in the industry advisory boards of a couple of TAFEs in the past, just exactly on this point. So I'm doing an excellent job of giving opportunity to those graduates to actually get industry relevant skills, and I think the only thing that is missing is probably having those communications, so having industry relevant projects while the students are actually still doing their coursework and their units. So that's probably, giving an opportunity to straight away apply what they learn in an industry relevant project is probably key. And I think, yeah, so as a final comment, I must say that, I really look forward of, Australia's got this world-class horticulture industry, and together with now this emerging tech, I think this is a very nice place to be for the next future. So that's what excited me about the sector.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, look, it's come to that time. If there's some unanswered questions, and I think we might be able to answer some of those offline, perhaps, Josh. But I just want to look. It's been such a wide-ranging conversation with the three of you, and I think we've also just uncovered some fantastic opportunities for what ag tech founders can do and how you can get into this industry, and that it's a very welcoming collective of people working in this space, and there's still lots more to do. But it's great to hear how enthusiastic and excited you are about this space. And I want to give a shout out to our friends at Agriculture Victoria, or AgVic, who LaunchVic have partnered with on a $2.2 million initiative to create that next generation of ag entrepreneurs. So that there'll be more on that too for Pete from TAFE. The AgVic smart farms are really an amazing gateway into research, I think, and bringing together all the farmers and researchers and the entrepreneurs as well. So it's a great way to do that innovation and skills development for the sector. So you can find out more about that for everyone on the call about that. We're going to pop a link in there. It's already in there. Excellent. But finally, look, we're at closing now. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. I want to give a big shout out to the LaunchVic team for having me and pulling together today's webinar and sorting that everything in the background, making it really great for us as well. But a big thanks to all of you attending. As you can see, there's a lot happening in this space, but we need a lot of hands and minds on deck. So I hope you'll think about being involved, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Emma.
Pleasure.